In this episode of Gear Modder, we're going to discuss the Mykel Hawke Peregrine 2.0 and the mods that I've added. Let's get started. Out of the box, the Mykel Hawke Peregrine 2.0 was a great blade. I think unfortunately it's been discontinued at the time of this recording. But I wanted to talk about some of the modifications that I made to this knife. When I first bought it, I knew immediately I was going to upgrade the sheath because I love Kydex sheaths. So I made this sheath to be multi-purposed. I included a seatbelt cutter in this sheath, a carbide blade sharpener in the sheath. This is the Titan cord, the Titan paracord that has the jute wire and it has the copper wire and very useful stuff. So I added that on there too. This is the ferro rod that I added for this sheath. This is the one from Charade. It works really well. I have several of them. I don't have many of their knives, I don't think, but I do like their fire stills. It does a really good job at throwing sparks. And then I added a lock retention system for this sheath that actually works really well. The knife won't come out when the retention system is activated. So enough about the sheath, let's get into the blade. So the original blade shape was a modified Tanto, and the thing that I noticed is that I'm just going to call them the spine, right? The spine of the metal here didn't line up with the actual Tanto blade. It didn't line up with the blade. So the first thing that I did was I kind of grinded that edge back so that the spine lined up with the little Tanto spike blade part right there. It gave it a little bit of a curvature here in the front, which I use for chopping. Does a really good job when you're chopping smaller things. Whereas the flat edge didn't do quite so well. I also added a working sawback on the top for notching. As everyone knows, you know, the sawbacks really they're really not designed to saw through trees. But if you've been out camping and you've made snares and traps or you've hung a hammock, being able to create a notch quickly and easily is a really good thing to be able to do. And so this sawback lets it happen. A close-up of the sawback. And they're offset just like the Tops saw teeth. They do a great job of notching. I actually love this knife so much that I made a Kydex Cryptex sheath for it in the Highlander pattern. I made it for Mykel Hawke, so I sent it to him, and he was kind enough to feature it on this cover of Off Grid, where he talks about survival and what to do in a case of survival scenarios. But he was kind enough to feature the sheath that I made him on this article. So shout out to Mykel Hawke, thanks for that, you're the best. Now I got the idea for the design of this sawback from my, I'll bring it up, it's nice for a second, my Tom Brown tracker. I like this sawback a lot. I like the way it made notches, and then just the design of the teeth. There are many different kinds of sawbacks. Like for example, this sawback here is very effective as well. I actually like this one a lot, but it is not comfortable if you ever needed to push down the blade or put pressure or baton. It would eat your baton up. But there are different kinds of sawbacks, but I like the one from Tops. It just works really well, so that's the one that I decided to go with. And so I added that sawback onto the knife. I also like, although some people think it's gimmicky, it actually does work really well. I liked in the Tops tracker blade, there is a groove for cutting fence wire. and that works great. So I wanted that same feature in my Peregrine, and so I went ahead and made that groove a little bit deeper. I've already batoned with this knife several times. I've taken it out after the mods have been made. There's no structural compromising in the integrity of the blade. So yeah, it works really well. That wire cutter fence breaker notch works really well. And if you've ever been hiking in Arkansas, for example, you're bound to come across some rusty barbed wire or old fence has been left behind somewhere in the woods, and so it can come in handy. Or even just pulling your hot pot out of the fire, right? A notch like that has many purposes, but I wanted to include that in this blade. The other thing I did was I adjusted the handle quite a bit. So it had a pronounced kind of a finger swell there for gripping the blade. But I found that as I was choking up on the blade or as I was just using it for more normal tasks, the finger swell would land right on my middle finger and cause a hot spot there. It's great for if you're holding it like this, which I think that's the way it was designed. But as you change your grip, it wasn't the most comfortable for me. So I went ahead and I grinded that down. Still left a little bit so that I could index and get a good grip on it, but I removed that finger swell. And then I added some gripping texture onto the handle. Again, as it gets wet or otherwise slippery, it still gives a lot of good grip while you're using this in the field. The other thing I added were bow drill divots. These are stainless steel divots that I put in there. They work really well, although my preferred method of starting a fire is using a ferrocerium rod or even just a lighter. Makes life easier, but they're there nonetheless, and I have access to them if I need them. The last mod that I made to this knife, and I think every knife I have, I like to be able to strike a fire rod with my knife versus having to carry around some third kind of striker, and it can get lost. And then, so I've had many of these knives, and I've tried a lot of different methods. I've sharpened the spine of the blade, give it a 90-degree angle, and it works okay. This area right here in the blade kind of works okay. I sharpened that just a little bit so that it would grab the ferrocerium, and it works okay as well. But the best part of the blade, in my opinion, on this particular blade, to sharpen to throw a spark, really is the pommel. And so if I grab the fire rod and I use the sharpened edge here of the pommel, it does fantastic. And I've gotten many fires on one strike with this method, and I like that exposed pommel and the area that I was able to sharpen. It really added a great addition to this blade. The blade is a fantastic blade. I love this blade. This is my go-to blade when I'm hiking in the woods or doing light camping. This is my blade. I love the tracker. I love my tracker as well. I'll discuss this one in another video. It's just a heavy blade. And so if I want to be able to do most of what this can do, then I will take, but a lighter blade, then I'll take my Peregrine every day because it can do just about everything. I love the recurve, little slight recurve here is great for making tinder and feather sticks or whatever you need to do. But just like on the top's tracker blade, the little quarter round here, it does a really good job of processing wood. Putting that curve on the front blade allowed it to do more chopping tasks. That was kind of one of the negative reviews I've seen on this knife is chopping's kind of rough because it didn't have that flat surface. Although this area here, because it's kind of protruding a little bit, does a really good job with chopping as well. So I don't know that I fully agreed with that criticism, but it's okay. But that does allow me to do precision chopping and really have no issues chopping with this knife at all. But those are the mods that I've made to the Mykel Hawke Peregrine 2.0. Fantastic knife. It does everything I want it to do. If I could make any other additions to this knife, which I might do in the future, is I might take these handle scales back off. I might carve out some of this G10 and maybe make room for another tool or so. That's just the way I am. I like to have as many backup tools as possible. But great blade. Again, I hate that it's been discontinued. If you can get your hands on one, I would say grab it, but it's also great for modding. There's a lot of things you can do to customize this blade to make it for you. That's it for this episode of Gear Modder. Next week, we'll have another knife to review or another piece of gear, and we'll talk about the mods that I made to it. Take care.